Yes. Hey Manish, good evening. Welcome over a cup of tea.
Jagdish, such a pleasure.
Yeah, hey, same here. And thanks for agreeing to come here and to come on this show. I was really not expecting because I know how private a person you are. But thanks,
Not so
thanks.
private.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So Manish and I go. Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the ClarITea Chat. So today we have the Group CIO of Aditya Birla Group, Manish Gupta, with us. Manish and I go a long way back. We started CRM together in Tata Motors, which became automotive world's largest CRM. He went on to become the CIO of Tata Technologies, Tata Motors, Arriva, head of enterprise IT for Schneider, and now he is Group CIO of Aditya Birla. So, incidentally, he's the one guy who I have to thank for getting me into a full-time IT or CIO role because I was looking for business roles after having done the big CRM in Tata Motors. I was actually looking at handing over CRM to him as a CIO, and I was looking at moving out into some business roles, which is when he kind of, in a way, gifted the CIO role to me. He left for something better, and I got the CIO role and became the accidental or full time CIO. Manish, thank you for that. Okay, so to everyone, Manish is very focused, and therefore he's very highly selective about spending time on non-core activities. Let me put it this way, like conferences or social media. But when I invited him and shared the purpose of the ClarITea Chat, he readily agreed to contribute, and sort of we resonated on the purpose of this dialogue. So let me share with you a presentation that I shared with him, which kind of made him agree to come here. Yeah. So I open each of my ClarITea chats with this, the why question of why the ClarITea Chat. So this is a discussion over a cup of tea on everything IT. Uh, and here are some dimensions that I want to, sort of uh, that I want to cover. The first thing is the purpose of this chat is that 83% of IT programs they fail to deliver the intended ROI. And what are the reasons for that? So one of them is the complexity, the industry specificity of technologies. Then processes. IT has to cover all the processes across the organization. Technology, again, you have to look at the entire spread of technologies. And finally, the people impact of whatever you do. In fact, I must say that when I showed Manish this presentation, he added the people impact part of it. So it's a four-dimensional complexity. Probably one of the reasons contributing to, or I would say a big reason contributing um, to the low success rate of IT programs. Then, if you look at the um, second factor, which leads to um, the low success rate, is the nascent management function. So if you look at any of the other functions, whether it is HR or finance or manufacturing, supply chain, take anything, each of them is at least 200 years old. They are like, they started, most of these functions started with the advent of industrial revolution. So they are at least 200 to 300 years old. Technology started only in like 70s in terms of mass usage. And if you look at IT management, it's just about a 30-year-old function. And of that, what we are undergoing right now in terms of digital transformation is hardly about 5 to 10 years old. So therefore, not too much of formal management pedagogy or literature, and not so well, I would say, deployed in terms of courses or management practices and all of that. Then there is this asymmetry of talent um, on the enterprise. So there is uh, a huge number of, I would say, the majority of talent is on on the sell side, which is the product companies or the services or SI companies, and you have, let's say, less than 5 to 10% of technology talent which is sitting on the enterprise side. So the talent on enterprise side is much lesser than the talent which is sitting on the sell side, which makes it difficult to manage this function in an enterprise. And then we have technology's high incremental margins. One of my technology seller friends once joked to me that uh, selling a technology product is an infinite incremental margin business, because the incremental cost of sale is zero, whereas therefore whatever you get is profit. Um, Even in services, the margins tend to be higher, and there's nothing right or wrong with those margins. But what happens then is there's a huge amount of focus on sales and marketing, and therefore a lot of noise that hits you as an IT management professional, which makes the decision making all the more difficult for you. So all of these factors, go contribute to this to a low success rate of IT programs. So here is therefore um the ClarITea Chat is learning from the 17% club. Last week we hosted Vijay Sethi, who has made successes with multiplicity of technologies. Now we have Manish, who has blazed a trail of success with technology. So managing IT, given all these factors and the fact that it's an asset management function, managing IT is still an art, because the science is not fully documented, and you learn the art from an accomplished artist. You cannot you cannot learn it by reading up something. So this is basically the artists are the CIOs on the 17% side, and the method is candid discussions on IT management themes, weaving in personal experiences and learnings. So these are informal chats on real questions in IT management and careers, all over a cup of tea. So let's now head into the next part of our discussion, and I bring up this memory from our old days. So this picture is Manish and me with our other team members and partners at the CRM Go Live. We still remember the date. It was 17th of November, uh, 17th of November 2003, almost about 18 years back. So let me segue this into in this discussion into our next one. So Manish, welcome to the experience sharing. This was one of our first, I would say, uh, successes with IT, and I'm sure you have had a lot more successes afterwards with all your roles. So, as you reflect on this whole, I would say, conundrum of very low success rate with the technologies, please share your life story with us, calling out some inflection points in your career, which gave you those first principles of creating success with IT. Maybe just some stories and learnings.
Now, first of all, thank you, Jagdish, and hi everyone. Hope everyone is keeping safe. Families are safe. These are unprecedented times, and hope everyone is coping with it well. So Jagdish and I are very close buddies, as you would have guessed, and he's an extremely professional person and very warm, and at the end, a very very wise man. So it's not easy to have a chat with such a wise man in the evening. I would have preferred a glass of wine to have this chat, but tea is fine as well. So it goes back, and I was a normal salesperson selling cars and trucks in South America, and then incidentally, and that was after my MBA and engineering, as most of the people love to do these days. And then I incidentally, accidentally got into IT. When I was given a charge to put Tata Motors on what is called digital, it was called e-commerce that time. So I had a boss, wonderful boss. He called me one day and said, Manish, why don't you put Tata Motors on this wonderful, journey of e-commerce? So I couldn't figure out where to start with. So I said, okay, let's figure out the supply chain. And I was very naive, to be honest. Means I had no clue of what IT is, and I was no consultant. So just a normal sales guy who knows what's the price of a truck at the time we didn't have car, so or a utility vehicle like Sumo. But so I sat down. I said, okay, let's look at the supply chain. We are buying a lot of material. Uh, we are producing cars and trucks. We are selling it through dealers and distributors. So I said, going into factories could be very difficult, especially in automotive. It's a power centers. I said, let's start from easy ones. Let's see at the supply chain. Let's see how we are buying material. Can we do something? So I started the e-commerce, the e-sourcing function in Tata Motors. It became a big success. We could save a lot of money there, close to 15-20% in cost, including buying steel on the internet. And imagine, we go back 21 years and say, can you buy steel on internet? Okay, looks quite daunting, and especially those times. And that's how the journey started. And one thing led to the other thing. Then, Jagdish spoke about CRM. We set up the CRM. Then I got full-fledged into IT somehow. And one of the reasons I've been reflecting as to how I got sucked into IT. I never said no to organizational priorities, in my career. And if you realize over the last 20 years, technology is becoming a big priority for the organization. And everyone is looking for people. I won't call them Balika Bakra, but some people who can do this. So so frankly, I was willing to raise my hand all the time and say, listen, I'm okay to do it. I was like a curious kid, with starry eyes, and they said, okay, go ahead, do it. And I think that's how I got into it. And once I got into it, I started liking it a lot. So it's like, you IT for me became like you die and wake up in heaven one day. So I said, oh, it's not a bad thing at all, and it has a element of curiosity in this. And I was quite sure that, and Jagdish can remember it, even 20 years back, I said, the time will come when this will become very, very core of the business. There's no reason for that. It's not a support thing at all. And once you have a conviction, I think one step leads to the other one. And that's how I've been, following my journey, my career journey. Moved from Tata Motors to a French company, and that itself is a competency to manage French. Then I lived in France, and then moved to the US. Came back to India 2 years back, and again joined a automotive group, and then Aditya Birla group. And believe me, I have no clue of how a cement is made or how aluminium is smelted, but I'm learning. And I think that's the beautiful part of my job, that I get to learn a lot about new businesses, new business models, everything new. So I think that's been the journey so far, just dabbling into multiple things and carrying from one thing to the other. And God has been kind, and so has been my wife, so, and children and friends. So thankfully we are just moving ahead.
Yeah, I think I distinctly remember this organization priorities thing that you talked about, because I remember when three of us were selected for just my When we were signed up for this CRM program, at that time, I think there was this pattern in the organization that, okay, hey, looks like we may have a problem on the LinkedIn. Uh, So Vinay, can you just check if we need to do something on the LinkedIn event for people to follow it on LinkedIn, or can you just put a comment on my post saying that this is coming on YouTube only? So that's the feedback I got, Manish. Sorry for this interruption.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll continue because the recording will be available uh, on YouTube. So yeah, that time there was coming back to the thought trail. There used to be this feeling that if you get into a project, it's like you get sidelined and you need to then move out. There's it's very hard for you to come back to the business, and we still took that plunge, and we still made sort of CRM into a function itself. Yeah. And yeah, I remember we used to talk about technology in terms of how it is going to change, and what are some of the and the many assumptions we made about technology long back. Like for example, all applications will be on browsers. So way back in 2003, we selected an application which was purely browser based and not a client server based, and that premise was that in future everything will be on the browser. So yeah, so many assumptions which have come right. So um, uh, going back to those CRM days, one of the things I remember distinctly, um, you know, we were looking at what kind of manpower we'll require in terms of going out to the dealers and doing the training and deployment. And Manish, I had some ideas. I had not done the maths, and Manish went back to the Excel and did some detailed maths on that, and then he came back with some number which was like we'll require eventually about I don't know, it was 30 or 50 people. Okay, and I was shocked, and I said how, and then he showed the entire analysis, and there was no fault in that. So right from that time I had this aha that the kind of strategic thought process and planning skills which Manish uses to detail out the big picture, and not just that, then also detailing it out in terms of working through the organization to execute the plans, de-risk the program, and I think the biggest thing, demanding resources from the organization. So like going out and saying that we'll need 50 people to deploy is not a small ask actually. So so Manish, that kind of brings me to again the purpose of this one, which is there are so these are some of the things which you have to really work on to make a successful program right at the early stage, right at the design stage. So I reflect on one of our discussions about the acid test of programs. So when we were having a discussion about DFF, that these programs are designed to fail. So talk us through about your acid test, which you put every program through, and to make it a to have a very high success rate in whatever you do.
Yeah, Jagdish, thanks for bringing up old memories. It's been quite some time though, but I think the memories are still very fresh in our own minds because it was kind of one big step we all took at a fairly young age. So for me, when I try to set up any program, I think we have to think big first. And while we may execute on in small chunks, which is always there, but I think the big picture is very important. And one thing I realized, and somebody told me early, that Manish, when you take an approval, whether you take an approval of 2 crores or you take an approval of 50 crores, the same process. And you'll be asked the same questions. You'll have to explain the same logic. So don't go for asking for 2 crores, ask for 50 crores. And another reason happens is when you ask for more money or a higher chunk, the approval process becomes very different. It goes to people pretty high up, and small money goes to people who are not so high up in hierarchy, and they have a very different way of looking at things. So if you have a big proposal, you have a big idea, don't let it die at the level of accountants, and take it up and take it up and have this conviction that what you're putting up will generate, let's say, 100 million, and you're asking only for 10 million. I think nobody's going to say no. But don't start by asking 100K or 200K, because you're not doing justice to your dream or to your idea or to your project or what you want to do. Let's say when I was in Europe, I put up a proposal for a program, and believe me, when I calculated everything, I said, oh. So I went to the board and said, we are going to save 700 million euros. So, to save 700 million euros is not a small number. But I had a big conviction that yes, by doing this, we can do this. And having that conviction is the first step in any acid test. Are you convinced about what you are doing? Because if you're not convinced yourself, and another way to look at it, if you were an entrepreneur, will you do it? If it was your own company, will you do it? And I think, to me, in the acid test, that's the number one rule. And I think 50% of answer comes from that. Because intuitively, yes, we got to do this. Now, of course, organizations don't work like that. There has to be a good business case. There has to be good logic. There has to be, everything falling in place. So I ask a few important questions, all the time to myself when I started. That, do you have a sponsor? Do you have a person who is willing to give you the money? And if not, I think I tell you, the project will get stuck somewhere down the line. And have you figured out, the big picture? Means at the end of it, how does it look like to you? Can you dream about it? If not, again, there's a big issue. Do you have a proper team managing it, and a clear program manager, project manager, which looks like a very simple step, but one may realize that lots of projects don't even have the project manager. And then, of course, a risk framework, a clear monitoring, clear reporting, and things like that. But to me, the first questions, which are important, are the resource allocation question. That is organization willing to allocate resources for this project or program, and why? And what's the value one is seeking? What's the value one is driving? And are we able to communicate the value to get the resource? And once you get the resource, again, in the choice of any project or program, is that once you will develop something, let's say you develop a software, you develop hardware, or whatever, eventually it'll land somewhere. It'll land into a factory, or land into a field force, or land into something. And then, would people be able to use it? I still remember, once I developed a big system, and the challenge was that it was let's say, a big application for field service folks. Now the question has to be mobile completely. You can't expect a field service person to go in and start entering something on a PC. And I realized that the project was not working earlier before I took over, because everything was based on a PC. Now you have to rethink completely and think of a service person and say, when a service person, he or she, goes to a client to service something, carrying a mobile, right? Or would leave the laptop behind in the car, unless it's some diagnostics or something. Not be carrying a laptop. A customer like to sign something, can be done on a mobile phone, and an invoice can be printed on a mobile phone. So many things can be done there. So the moment you start thinking from that person's standpoint, then you make it a success. So I think as long as you tie up both the ends, one from the resource allocation standpoint, which is of the organizational value, and also at the user standpoint, and once you tie both of them up, that's where the aha moment happens, because then you have figured out the entire program end to end. And most of the time we don't do that, because I've not done it for lots of things, because we're happy, we got the money, somebody has approved, so let's go. We forget this population is going to be, let's say, I'm not calling the victims, but let's say the users of what we do, and if you think about them and kind of ensure that it's tied up end to end, it's always a success. So I tend to keep both the ends in place anytime I look at any problem to solve, the user community and of course the decision making community, and their goals may not be the same all the time, I can tell you, and that's where we come in. We have to ensure that all goals are clearly are managed.
No, absolutely. And yeah, like looking at the decision making, looking at the users, and then, tying up the resources clearly. This kind of makes me reflect back on our times when we said that we want to go on browser and we want to have a flexible UI, right? Because the dealers are going to use it. So we are
Absolutely.
not going for a green screen. Uh, in fact, Manish, let me recall one of my incidents also. So there was a time when we were kind of taking analytics to the next level and investing in advanced analytics, and so we needed about maybe about 15, 20 crore rupees. And I asked the team to build a business case, and they built a business case of what 40 crore rupees. And I'm like, advanced analytics for Tata, for a company of 40,000 crores, having a business case of 40 crores. I said, I am not taking it forward unless you show me at least 1%, impact on the organization. So they actually came up with a business case of 500 crores, went for investment, and then everybody kind of developed cold feet, our planning department, and they said, no, we want business approval. Now बिल्ली के गले में घंटी कौन बांधेगा? So who's going to take that? I said, no, I said it, so I'm going to take it. So I actually went to both the business unit heads with a summary of the proposal. And I also told them, I said, listen, this is an investment in advanced analytics. If you don't think, if you are not convinced that it can make an impact on 1% of your overall size, don't sign it, please. And actually, they both signed it. So you are right. Those people, they also think differently. Sometimes we are afraid, but they think differently, and this question is very valid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the moment you show a value of 100 crores, tell me a CEO who is going to say no to you.
Oh, absolutely.
Just but the catch is, it has to, you have to have full conviction at the end. One has to deliver, and I think there are lots of opportunities today in front of all of us as a CIO community, where we can find these cases. I think we are scared ourselves. We are scared to talk of big numbers. We are scared to rock the boat or topple the apple cart. And but if you're brave enough, we have the conviction ourselves. I think most of the time, luck is in our favor. And I think we have to become more brave. That's what I realized, that we are shy. We are shy people because we get beaten down by so many operational topics day long, inside out, and really, I think that conviction and freshness of ideas sometimes we are not able to bring. But more, I think we keep a focus. It's our role, it's our job, and let's not get sucked into one technology or one project or whatever, and start looking at organization again and again. I think we'll find a lot of value, and I'm sure all of us can do it every day. It's
Yeah.
a wonderful time to apply technology, I can tell you. I still
No.
feel I'm young, I'm still 30 years old.
Oh, yeah. This is something which always remains fresh. So, Manish, let's move on. One of the important aspects of making success with anything today, especially when you're a leader, is networking. Okay, you have to network with your stakeholders, partners, and everybody. And I remember there's a story that this headhunter called me and just wanted to check with me, about you. And one of the things,
Okay.
and it's like then my warning to her was, what, I know why you're calling me, because you don't find him on LinkedIn. Never make that mistake. Manish is so well networked, okay, and don't go by his LinkedIn presence. So this is like, networking without social networking is how I call it. So tell us how you network. I mean, I know you're very well networked, but people don't see you much in conferences or in social media. Tell us your secret sauce of networking.
No, it's not so secret. I do have lots of connections on LinkedIn. I have close to 3,000 connections. So it's not such a small number as well. Okay, I'm not on so much on Facebook, Twitter, etc. I don't tweet unless I get very upset by a government agency or something. So I think social media to me has its own, both pros and cons. And I'm connected. I spend quite some time on LinkedIn. But yes, I'm not very vocal, or I'm not doing a lot of commenting on many posts, etc., which is a fact. But I do network one on one quite a lot. There are a lot of people, and I believe in having a bit of a deeper relationships with people than a very superficial one. And I tell you, means lots of people do connect with me every month or every day. So this is where I believe in a lot of bespoke relationships. Like for example, not so much because of pandemic, but even in a business setting, I'll try to have lunch with somebody different every day. Reach out to newer people. So because once you have lunch with somebody, it's the best time to know someone. So have a coffee. So I do meet up a lot of people. I'm generally never saying no to any partner trying to reach out to me or having a call or whatever. And even for large conferences, I find a substitute. So normally after the conference, I'll keep a session with the same partner, maybe more one-on-one or in a smaller group, to understand what's happening. But yeah, probably I'm not too much availing the free wine and dining, but otherwise it's okay. So I'm networking, but I believe not only very superficial, presence, but something deeper. And also, like one of the companies I worked in was asking the promoter. I said, "Hey, uh, not many people know us." He said, "Manish, those who need to know, they know us, and they know us very well." So I said, "Okay." So I think for me also, those who need to, I need to know, and those who need to know me, I think you're fairly well connected. But yes, and that's, to me, that's good enough to have a few good friends, then a lot of Facebook friends. So I think it's a personal choice, but I believe to be making it old style, a bit more personally.
Yeah. Hey, no, that's actually so important in today's world, where we are trying to maximize the size of our network, right? It's basically to, have meaningful relationships, and the social media just helps discover and, and also like continue that. So, but thanks for that perspective. And I think, to everybody who's listening out there, if you think Manish is unapproachable, he's not. Uh, and I know it with my personal experience, the number of people he's always ready to meet and help. So now, Manish, the last time we discussed it, we had a big laugh at it. Actually, when you mentioned that everybody hates IT, but they want their kids to be in IT. So so here is this, all the business guys, and and I can see a lot of questions here, about the business IT connect or versus business IT divide. Personally, I hate the word business IT. I would rather call it business functions than IT, because IT is also another business function. But yeah, tell us. You did talk about it a little bit earlier, but yeah, uh, just elaborate on that. And of course, with some story.
Yeah. No. I think when I was in so-called business, okay, because I still consider myself to be in business. So I hate this word when somebody tells me that you are in IT and I'm in business. I say, hey, listen, what do you do? They say I'm in finance. I say, okay, I'm in IT. So how is it different? Or you're in strategy and I'm in IT. How is it different? So I think first of all, the problem is we ourselves are using a lingo which is not okay. So we got to stop this. And I think the onus is on us as a community then on the other parts of the businesses, because we are very happy to say this is business, this is IT, I'm IT, you are business. Stop it. Okay, we are all business at the end of it. And I think it starts from us. That's one. So I never assume any point in time that I'm not part of business, and I'm happy to, portray myself. I'm not shy in a meeting to talk about some business topics, even if I'm representing technology or IT, because I may have a perspective, like anybody else. So first, I think we have to uh, be confident in what we do. We all do a very, very, very important, let's say, part of business today. And believe me, we are making far more contributions to the business today than anybody else can think. And we are a very important part of this whole story and a very important part of this whole puzzle. So first, having this self-confidence is very important. Second, I think you said it, Jagdish, that technology is a new function, and application of technology is a newer function. We have been seeing it in the last 20, 25 years only, that, how technology application has taken off. And that brings a set of challenges and the expectation also. You talked about, kind of asymmetry in talent, and the big gorillas out there are technology partners who are creating. And I think a lot of times we also get into hype cycle, you know, and typically those business leaders who are not so accustomed to technology, probably it's easier for them to get into this hype cycle. And then the expectations are so much. For example, you would have seen it so many times. A partner would come and they would start with nice analytics dashboards with the needles moving here and there, life looking so hunky dory. But you realize when it's going to be done. Okay, I don't know, 5 years, maybe 6 years, once your transactional system is out there. And from day one, there will be a business CEO who will think, I'm going to get this. That's what I paid the money for. So, and it's never going to happen. So there'll be a kind of dissatisfaction happening. And I think it's up to us to to set this expectation right, in the beginning itself, and be very clear what will be delivered, what will not be delivered, and take them through the journey. And they don't hate you in that case. I remember a story, Jagdish, which goes back to our old company. And sorry, I may narrate those stories because, like you, I'm still very fond of that place. So I was starting this e-sourcing program, and my boss, being a very, 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 wise man and somebody of very high stature, he called me and said, Manish, who do you think kind of stopping you from doing this, buying, let's say, material online? So I named two people, who were pretty high up in the organization. He didn't say anything, just smiled, and they were very, very high up. And next I know, after a week, his assistant calls me and say, Manish, there are 3 tickets. You go to a conference in Singapore, and I realized the other two going with those two folks. So, so and I tell you, this was such a huge change management, learning for me. That not necessarily you're trying to convince somebody, but the entire experience or the exposure part, of this, what technology can do to you. So what happened? We all three went to Singapore. We spent some time together. We had some fun together as well. They were pretty older than me in those days, but I think they got exposed to some concept. They talked to other leaders around the world, who had done similar things. And when they came back, I think there was a change in perspective. So 80% of my job was done around change management. And I think it was the best onboarding I saw from, let's say, from functional side. I won't call it business side because I just said, but let's say from a factory head and, let's say, head of procurement to come together. And the program became a success, I believe, just because that conference happened. And sometimes we need to find those small events, where there's a fear or there's a lack of education, there's a lack of understanding, because it's a new thing and people are very scared. And also they're very scared that we should not just be wasting and losing a lot of money, because everybody has heard a lot of horror stories as well. where a lot of IT programs have gone bad, and you already said that 83% of programs fail, right? And so there is a lot of fear. So they're always very skeptical. And but I think as long as you have a conviction, you have very clear dialogue, you expose them, there's a change management involved in it, and then I think when you form a team together, there's no stopping. So inherently, I don't believe they hate, but maybe there could be a sense of jealousy, maybe a little bit, because it's a very fast-moving function. But at the end, I think as long as there's a good dialogue, good communication, good understanding, they come on board very fast.
Yeah. No, I think this is also a big lesson in change management. I remember, I think we reused the same learning somewhere else. If you remember in CRM, we asked the same question: who are going to be the biggest, potential roadblocks to the program? And it came out to be that, since we were replacing all the dealer systems with this central CRM, the IT guys at the dealership will be our biggest, threats to the system. They might sabotage it. And I think the next thing we did was we put them on a pedestal, right? We designed, a 1 week training program for them, flew them to Bombay. We sort of told them, what kind of career stories they'll be building if they adopt this new technology and all that. And the next thing we know that, all these guys were excited rather than, being the threats to the program. So I
Yeah,
guess those principles remain similar. So let me move on, Manish, to the next one. See, when we were in CRM, we had a lean team of about 5 people, but 20 times the team member from vendors. Okay. Well, after you left, I increased the team size. Same thing happened next time. So this is one thing, where we differ is in terms of the size of the team. So, I have been a proponent of, keeping accountability inside and having team members who will basically manage it all. Whereas I think I know you believe in a very lean team and, working more strategically with partners and all. And, at least personally, I want to learn that secret sauce of how do you keep it lean and how do you still keep it accountable? And that brings to us the big question around asymmetry of talent and and how do you leverage the partner network?
no, I think there's no one answer. When I was in Europe, I was running a very large team as well. Fairly large team, but a lot of partners as also. But the setup was very big. So and then I think in other organizations, my team has been very small, but I've been running some very large programs as well. So I think both the models work, but the big thing is that the needs in IT are changing every time. There's technology which is changing as well, and and that calls for very different skills. Year after year after year. And what happens is if you have a very large team, especially in an enterprise setup, you block a lot of money for the team itself. And when you need to spend something, everything looks incremental. So what happens? And sometimes you realize that the same team may not appreciate new things because they are accustomed to something, and they become the roadblock themselves. And I'm not saying everybody is in the same boat, but generally that's what I found out. So there's some roles. So if you look at the team composition and you look at what we do, let's say you're creating a product of any kind, hardware, software, application, whatever. Then there's going to be application of that product in the organization, and where people are going to use it. So you need a set of people who are going to manage the product and who are also going to deploy it in the organization. That's where the organizational skills are required. They need to know the context, they need to know the people, they need to know everything. But as far as the technology part is there, I think it can easily be contributed by the partner network because they're better equipped at it all the time. And and so I believe that if you look at anything, you have to decide how much of that is going to be something internal in terms of the value part, and how much of it's going to be, the coming from external perspective. Let's say you want to deploy a blockchain project today. Now, I doubt whether there will be skills around blockchain in any enterprise IT team.
Absolutely.
So it's not possible. It's a new thing. Or let's say you want to dabble into quantum computing. I'm trying to do something around that. So, or any new area. Now, if I have to start something, I have to get some skills which are not with us. Now, the key here, Jagdish, which I always believe is you have to make them look like very inclusive, and it's like one is calling for a party, but second is asking them to dance. So I think we get to dance together, and not only be joining a party. So and the moment you set up those mechanics, I think it starts looking like one team. So, so the creation of a team is becomes very important, where you may have a couple of guys who know the organization, who know the context, who are able to navigate it, and the folks who really know what to be done. And as long as you make it one team, I think it flies very well. If you try to put a team where they are trying to manage the people who know everything, then it becomes very sequential, and that's where the frustration happens. I think as long as we make it more, let's say, seamless and more in a circle, let's say it, I think the teams work very well. The question will be how do you get the right skills and put them all together, make it very inclusive and make it part of look like one team. And I think we did it many a times. And I think we should not start differentiating once you are in a project or something, your own people versus the people coming from partners, because they all are, for the same cause. And the moment uh, anybody starts understanding that, yes, we're working for the same cause, magic happens. And I remember, a long time back when we were doing a project, even a small coder or configurator, I would not call them small because they are very important, but a new member of the team will join in a large team. Typically, I would spend first hour explaining the project. So the project manager once asked me, why you spend Manish so much of time explaining all the big things? And it was the same presentation I'd made to the board. I said, you know what? When you get people to work on a home, and if they don't know how the home is going to look like, they think they are working on a wall or they're working for the floor. But if they know they are building a home, I think it's a different motivation altogether. So many times it's our fault. We don't give the big picture. You only tell them nuts and bolts, and there's no motivation for people to work. And I think this is where we need to step up, in my view, to give them a big picture and make them as motivated. They may be making a small part of the entire home, but finally they're all making a home, and not only a wall or painting a door or painting a wall.
Yeah. No, in fact, so true, Manish. In fact, I recently, about a week back, I posted a video about how to leverage experts, which is like, clarify the context, tell more about yourself and what you want to do for them to contribute their best. And I think, it's not just for experts, it's for everybody. It's right from everybody who's part of it. And I think this communication is a very important part of inclusion, right? You can't be inclusive without communicating
Yeah.
what you want and what's the bigger picture, isn't it?
No, absolutely, absolutely, and that's why one needs to invest energy, and
Yeah.
uh, and let's not take it for granted, because everybody comes to work to succeed, in my view. So it's all about how do you engage them and harness the energy. There's so much of energy all around, and I think if you're able to harness and channelize, the magic happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes by organizations, we are structured and wired up to stop this energy flowing. We create structure, we create team, we create them in silos, we give them roles. And if you see at the end of it, all of this is to stop energy from flowing. And that's why I tend to believe that leaner the teams are, and more people who are bringing their own perspective and contribution very clearly, the energy flows very well. There's a seamlessness of energy, and that's where we get the best.
Yeah. And I
Though
think,
but that's how I see the equation.
no, you're so right. And, like I am now conceptualizing that, a leader's job is to break these walls and, these, what do you call, sluices to let the energy flow and then bring that inclusivity. Yeah, I can reflect that, whichever IT programs we were doing or we had done, even, when you were the CIO and I was in CRM, like, we were always, just first form that one team, okay, get everybody on the same plane, and then only you can really go together. If people are in levels of thought, you can't succeed. So, and this again, takes me back to our CRM days. If you remember, we were telling this big vision that we had told our senior leaders. We were going out and telling these to each and every dealer. I remember I used to travel to each and every state capital and communicating the same deck to all the dealers and field managers. Yeah, probably one of the ways to align and make it inclusive. Yeah. So Manish,
Absolutely.
yeah. So Manish, there are lots of audience questions, great engagement. So, but before I go there, let me ask you this last question. I have always seen you like, always up to date with technology and always being very passionate about it. And,
So Jagdish has broken, and but let me guess his question. So what he's asking is, how do you keep yourself updated with all the technology, etc. And so for me, it's very simple. I believe in micro learning myself. So I have a good Udemy account, Udacity, and also EDX, etc. I enroll in multiple courses. When there's a sale, I buy them in bulk, and I start dabbling into small things. I read, and luckily, in my position, I can talk to a lot of influential people who have done something and get to know one-on-one, some sessions, and get a lot of learning. I'm not scared to go to an expert who might be very junior in hierarchy and ask them, him or her, to explain to me something. And as long as you're humble about it, and as long as you think that we should not feel shy. And I have to tell you a story, and that resonates with me. Probably I got it very early in my life. My father used to work in a government department, and we were kids in class 9, or my brother was class 7. And one day he came home, and the computers had just started that time. So I used to have a book saying ABC of computers or something, which was telling about hardware. So one day he came and said, Manish, what is a CPU? So I opened my book and explained to him the CPU. And I asked him, why are you asking this question? So he said, you know what? And he was at a fairly high position in government of India. So he said, there was a big presentation to the entire ministry. And a company came and said, what they said is, our computers have CPUs. And everybody nodded. Like, big boys, and he said, nobody understood what a CPU is. But he was humble enough to understand what a PC is, what a CPU is, what a keyboard is, and different things. Next time when there was a meeting, it looks like he was a star because he knew what a CPU means. So, so I think we should not always nod heads that we understand, and be humble about it, saying, okay, we don't know. Maybe somebody, a kid may know about it. So let's go to him or her and ask the question and learn rather than trying to say that we know it all. So I think humility goes a long way, and acceptance that today's generation is far more learned in technology than what we are, and I think let's learn, and we also know a few things, so let's collaborate. But that's my philosophy for learning, at least, and I try to follow it and pick up things from anybody who is willing to teach me.
yeah. So that reminds me, Manish, of this concept of reverse mentoring, where you pick up, a younger team member who's very adept with some of these technologies, and then you learn from it. So I remember once, the CEO asked me that he wants to use Twitter. So first thing, we had a good discussion on why someone should use Twitter or not, and I thankfully I had used it before to have some perspective on it. I said, but how do I use it? And I just looked around his office, and I found the youngest guy, and I said, you know what? You please spend like 15 minutes every day with him, and you will learn how to use Twitter. And I think people at senior levels are humble, but humility is a very important aspect for learning anything. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
We have,
So
and do we have time for some questions, take these? How do you want to take it?
yeah, we have about 5-10 minutes. So I hope we can stretch for maybe another few minutes, Manish, if you're
I'm
fine.
good. I'm good, thanks.
Oh,
I'm good.
okay. Yeah. So it's our show, so we can stretch it, and the recording will be available. So if anybody's short of time, they can watch it later. Yeah. So there's a question from Aditya Pal. Hi, Aditya. It is about how important it is to have business aligned with IT initiatives. How do you approach it? I think Manish talked about the acid test, and I think that should answer that question. Let me go forward. As a group CIO of large conglomerate, will you invest in technology or the vision? This is from Simarpreet Singh, Manish.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question, Simar. Thanks for asking this. Because, uh, you know, why it's so tricky is it's very difficult to foresee the vision completely, and especially the strategy part. A lot of people say that let IT follow the strategy. I don't believe in it. Reason is by the time you follow, it's already too late. So the question is, how do you start creating the Lego blocks of technology? So anytime the way vision emerges, you're ready for it. You're ready to execute. You're ready to respond. And and that's why I'm a very firm believer in setting up a few platforms for a large conglomerate so that we can adapt very quickly and don't make it hard coded, but keep it flexible like Lego blocks, where you may create any shape whenever the need comes in, and you can respond to it. For example, let's say if you look at capabilities, every organization would like to have some capabilities, whether it's on supply chain side, customer experience side, even things like blockchain, even employee side, many areas. And if you bank up those technologies or those capabilities, you can deploy them in the way vision happens, in the way, let's say, a conglomerate may get into a new area, you know. So if you have your competencies in cloud, you have the competencies to rapidly develop applications, you've got the components on e-commerce, you've got the components of customer experience, you can very easily assemble them and and help a business come out very very quickly. It can be brick or mortar business. It could be a new age, complete new business on internet itself. But it could be a management school, So we just opened a management school, and believe me, we use most of the components which are there with us already. So the question is that how do you respond to a changing need? How do you respond to either a business model coming up or new business coming up or some other need coming up? So keep the Lego blocks ready. Don't make it hard coded, but keep them in a way that they're already being used, but you are ready to reuse them. Okay, so I think that's the key, and that's what I believe in. But thanks for this question. I think it's a very good question.
Yeah, it's a very important question, and I think and just to add my 2 cents to it, it's also about the product mindset that you look
Yeah,
everything from a point of view of reuse. Typically, I think this is one issue that I've seen people get into, that you do a project for a particular purpose, and then you start the next project, and you have really forgotten about all the other things that you've done. So I think before we do something new, we really need to look back into a repository. What can I reuse? And therefore, then when you build it, you have to build it for reuse. That means in terms of
absolutely.
documentation, in
And I
terms of the
go one step further.
architecture.
When you build the repository, build with the idea that you're going to reuse each and every component, and
Absolutely.
and don't make it be accidental. And that's where you need to think of some very basic building blocks, your integration architectures, API architectures, your data repositories, and things like that. So I think now in technology, the architecture, which is to me the thought process of a CIO, becomes very, very, very handy. We cannot start implementing IT in any setup just by starting an application project or something. We need to start thinking architecture, and some basic building blocks, around APIs, around other key competencies and key capabilities, and keeping as a repository and trying to assemble them together. So we are trying to become an IKEA shop, and I think it's a DIY kind of a thing. And more we are able to do it, and these components, I think we can create any shape and any size or whatever. So
Yeah.
and I think that's where I believe the world is moving also.
Yeah, that's right. The whole API, stuff is nothing but reuse, reuse, reuse. In fact, I was like smiling ear to ear when you were talking about the building blocks and the architecture and all. If you remember, the kind of tough battles we used to have with our system integrator way back. In terms of how to architect our product structure and stuff like that. And we were like, no, 10 years later, it should still work. And they're like, no, this is faster to do, and it will last you 3 years. I said, no. Okay, so let me move on to the other question. So this question is from Manik. He says that there's a big proliferation of cloud and there's a technology changing at a fast rate. So how do you manage the complexity that comes with the proliferation of cloud?
Yeah, I think to me, cloud is something like, I've worked in automotive as well as energy, so I can tell you, uh, if you follow these industries. So let's say 100 years back, not too far back, in Detroit, there were more than 2,000 auto companies, who were making cars. If you look at electricity, when it started, everybody had their own power plant, a small one. And if you see a power factor of, let's say, the home generator you carry, it's around 15. You go to a very large size power plant, it operates 85, 90, 95, So by definition, they're more efficient and they're more economical. I think same goes for computing. That the hyperscale computing is by default is far more efficient, is far more effective, and it's a question of when and how, and not a question of if we need to go there or not. Still, you may keep, let's say, in energy, a small transformer near your home, so you may have something on the edge, which will help you to do some computing, locally. And everybody has those equipments, even at home, for energy. But still, you draw most of your energy from very large power plants. So I'm sure we are going to all draw energy from computing resources from a cloud. Now, and also, a lot of times when it comes to security questions, so it's like keeping a locker at your home versus keeping a locker in your bank. I tell you, locker in a bank is far more secure than keeping a locker at your home, because even your maid may know your password. I can tell you. So this is, I think, to me, it's is there. I think question is, as CIO community, how do you manage the change? How do you convince people? How do you make them aware? But but to me, I think it's going there very rapidly, and I have no doubt that this question will be behind us in a few years. We won't be even asking this question whether we should go to cloud or not to cloud, because there is no choice. I'm a very firm believer that it will go there.
Yeah, I remember, Manish, way back again, those times when you're setting up that central CRM. I used to have one slide which used to have a power plant photo here and a small genset photo. And I used to take it to the dealers and looking at their face, I used to tell them that, listen, you have gensets and we want to give you a power plant. Yeah. So maybe I'll pick up some random questions, not really going in a sequence. Um, how is it different to engage with large OEMs and enterprise IT setups? How do you decide with whom and enterprise IT startups? So it's how do you decide with whom to work, large OEMs versus enterprise IT startups? This is the question from Amrinder.
Yeah, I think they both add their own values. So we should not discard one for the sake of other. So you need large tech players because they give you some very solid piece of technology, which requires a lot of upfront investment, to create something. But at the same time, I think one would like to use a lot of startups who are typically getting into very niche area, specific domain. And now you know that startups are going very vertical. They're not stopping at technology only, but they want to take the full domain. And that's been the something culture or trend I'm seeing in the valley, especially where startups start small but gets full vertical, and they don't stop at tech only. So I think they both bring in their value. Question is, how do you engage with both of them? There's a different life cycle though to engage with entrepreneurs, because first they are starved of funds, they don't have so much of resources, they don't have so much of bandwidth. You cannot push them in front of your procurement guys, so you have to be very careful not to suck all the energy and enthusiasm. If you're a large conglomerate, so you have to handhold them, and that's a part which I think as enterprise CIOs we have to be very, very, very aware of. That you need to talk to startups in a very different way. Engagement model has to be very different. Now, big techs are, they're kind of used to working with large corporates, so they know very well, how to deal. They know how to navigate. So I think there is a different level of different type of engagement you have with them. But to me, both are very important part of the puzzle, and they both bring different set of perspectives. But for example, if I have to do something on IoT for a basic, let's say, IoT platform, I may go with a very large partner or tech partner. But on top of it, for specific algorithms around solving specific problems, let's say around energy or transportation or maintenance or quality, I may still go to a lot of startups who would have done some wonderful things, by creating those innovative solutions, and I'll like to give them a chance as well. But for infrastructure part, the big pieces, I'll have to go to big techs. But for innovation part, I think we have to look at two speed here completely.
Yeah, yeah. So this reminds me of this base layer model where you have these pieces which are core to you, your infrastructure, ERP, and then you have some of your differentiating pieces like your supply chain, your CRM, and all that. You have the innovation pieces. So as you go up, your risk taking ability should be higher and higher. A very important question, Manish, uh, about shadow IT. Says today with cloud, the BUs choose to launch their campaigns on cloud, leading to shadow IT. What challenges the CIO would face to convince the BUs to opt out of shadow IT and not cause this conflict?
Yeah, I think I slightly differ on this wording itself called IT and shadow IT. And I think somewhere we tend to monopolize this IT. As IT department or CIO, we think IT is something we should only be doing, and nobody else has a right to do this. And that's like monopoly over IT, and anybody else who does it, we call it shadow IT. Now, the question is, maybe they want something, and nowadays they have resources to do it. They can go onto cloud, they may catch hold of somebody, they may deploy someone. So fine, it's okay. And you can't say please don't do this if it makes sense. So I guess there are some few mechanisms in today's world we need to set up as CIOs, and I've tried to do a few things which I can share with the audience. One is, everything which is being done for the sake of business is legitimate. That's one. So let's stop calling anything a shadow or illegitimate or something. Now, the risk could be around security, the risk could be around not proper standards, etc., which is always a challenge. So, for example, in my last organization, I had a certification program where I said, guys, you're free to do anything, but at the end, there's a small team which would certify, this particular application. And it's important because if you find any uncertified, it's like, something inside. So we said something is inside it, which means certified. So we used to create a small logo, that it means certified. Now, the moment certified, it means certified for security, it means certified certain standards, but it doesn't matter, let anybody develop it. But at the end, it has to be certified. And we said, listen, guys, if you develop these applications onto the platforms which I proposed, by default, they're certified. Okay, so you don't need to go through a huge process of getting a certification. So there's an incentive to come to, what you call enterprise platforms. Then for cloud again, you can wrap your arms around and say, hey guys, you can talk to the cloud provider and say, you know, you can tell business to go through me for cloud. At least have an enterprise agreement where anybody can, but don't stop them from going to cloud. So I think we can put enough control points around it to say, if you go to cloud, at least I'm aware what data is hosted on the cloud because the enterprise property. Second, if you want to develop an application, okay, let me certify it for security at least, at the end. And then the dialogue starts happening and they realize, what, these guys are not trying to be monopolistic. They're not a department of no. So, a lot of time people say, you guys are department of no. We ask you anything, you say no. Okay, first thing is no. First thing is, oh, this software cannot do this, or this cannot be done, or that cannot be done. I think we have to get out of that mindset. And it's our own change because we have so much time, so many times you get into this idea of controlling everything and trying to be monopolistic and that everybody else is a shadow IT. So I think we have to now find a way. I call it multi-channel IT or anything, or let's say multi-group IT or IT proliferation, even at the consumer end or whatever. But let's find better words than calling it shadow IT. The more we call shadow IT, more we'll get isolated as a community. And I think we need to find different ways of completely working. And because the demand is so much, everybody needs it. We cannot fulfill it. So it looks like Indian Railways, where there's so much of demand, but all the bogies are full. Everybody's scrambling for finding a reservation, and then we cannot be in that state. You have to privatize it. You have to open it up. You have to say, guys, please go ahead and do it. We'll find a way for you.
No, I think that's a great perspective, Manish. That there's nothing called shadow IT, and I would rather call it a federated IT, right?
Yeah.
The federal
You
government
find a good
structure.
name, Jagdish. I trust on you. Maybe you. Why don't you find a good name? I'm going to take it from you, and we'll call it that name. But I think it's important that as a community we find a good name, and
Yeah.
and I hate this shadow IT concept itself. Somebody is doing it right, so what's the big deal?
Yeah, in fact, I think I also had the same approach, and in fact, I remember there was one, there's this whole host of calibration challenges of tools, right? In each plant there are about 40,000 tools, these various, right, from those torque wrenches to these vernier calipers and all of that, and everything requires a calibration either once a month or once in 3 months. And we never had a solution for that. So somebody in Jamshedpur actually developed something on MS Access, okay, and knowing that that I have this open approach, they kind of showed it to me, and I said, why don't we productize it? Instead of MS Access, the whole, you have done the entire logic, you have done the entire database model. Why don't we just put it like on a server where all the 7 plants can use it? So we have to sort of promote that innovation flair in
Yeah,
the company,
absolutely. So
becoming
the model of co-option has to be developed. We have to
yeah.
co-opt people because and not compete with them, not stop them, not feel threatened, not feel insecure. I think we have to start facilitating in the right way. Example, I'm a big proponent of a low-code platform. I want more and more people to develop applications. So why only some smart people should develop it, right? So I'll rather make it and give a platform to everybody, saying, guys, develop the application. I'll keep it components for have to only for security and UI UX brand purposes. But I'm not
Yeah,
going to control too many things.
there was a question on low code platform. So before I ask, you have answered. Hey, so I
Sorry,
think yeah, just in the interest of time, I would wrap it up in the next few minutes. So I have this habit of taking notes, so I'll just recap some of it. So some snippets that I captured was that stay yes to organization priorities, and you will always succeed. Take up the big ideas, Don't stop it just because if it is big, because whether it's a 2 crore or 50 crore, the process is similar. But if you have a 50 crore idea, probably the guys it will go to will have a different way of thinking, and you might bypass bureaucracy, and that exactly happened with us in CRM as well. Yeah. So yeah, this acid test of programs, I think there are some basic questions that we need to ask. Whether it's a sponsor, there's resource allocation properly. Are the people who are going to be affected by it, are they really going to use it or not? So these are some genuine questions which we need to ask before really jumping into something. On networking, yes, it was deeper relationship with people, more meaningful relationship than just going by the plain vanilla social networking. On the relationship with the business, I think very good point about having the right lingo, setting the expectations, identifying who are your sort of roadblocks or detractors, and then taking them through an experience which just changes their mindset, right? So instead of like having to put them through some change management program, especially at a decision
Yeah,
maker level.
take them out for a drink, and I tell you that's much better.
Yeah, that's right. Many of the programs have got conceptualized like that. Yeah, I think another, I'm finding very, I would say, principle-driven answers there rather than the hacks. Do this way, do it this way. It's like, how do you think about it? So in terms of the team size, very clearly that, people who are going to be having those dialogues or who are going to be working the organization should be with you. But, where things are changing, the technologies are changing, those are where you should leverage the ecosystem. Yeah, humility to keep learning, um, follow the vision or strategy, follow the vision, create Lego blocks of technology, create reusability in the enterprise, and then, so that you're able to you're able to spawn solutions out of what already exists with you into anything new that the business wants to do. And I think I really love, and I'm seeing those, comments here about your views on shadow IT. That there's nothing called shadow IT. We need to find a new word, and some innovative approaches like like certifying solutions found by others. But great dialogue, Manish. I must say that this kind of focused 1 hour technology only dialogue we also haven't had. So it's been a learning for me too. Thank you so much for coming on this show. For everybody who's watching this or the recording, this will be on LinkedIn, this will be on YouTube. So please watch it. And this is one very, very refreshing conversation,
No,
Manish.
thank you, Jagdish. I must congratulate you for starting this. And I know you are doing some wonderful work. Wish you all the success. I know, as I said, you're a very wise man, very professional. So wish you all the success and all the great stuff you're doing right now. And thanks for starting this. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a big learning for me as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Manish. Thanks everyone for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Bye bye.